Hello, good evening. Gary Edward Geddle, psychologist, psychotherapist. Today is Tuesday, the 3rd of June 2025. And tonight I'm going to talk about a concept that is called reframing. Reframing a positive change to your perspective on things like that. So that's for tonight. As usual, because I am part of the 70-day challenge, I tend to talk a little bit about myself, where I'm at, and what's happening for me. So it's Tuesday. I fasted yesterday. Today, I've strangely not eaten very little because it just hasn't happened that way. I went to the dentist this morning and had a cleaning, détartrage. What do we say in English, détartrage? I can't remember, just taking the tartar off. And so that was fun, as usual. I came to work and I was patients basically all day. At the end of the day, I went to the gym it was actually only about half an hour because I just feel a bit tired today. And I just thought, no, I just don't have it. So I stopped after half an hour and went and got a coffee and sat and then the coffee outside. And a doctor actually phoned me up for a discussion about a patient. So sort of it became useful. That reminds me, I need to bill for that. Oh, yes. Oh, I can bill. Oh, that's a half an hour I can bill for. Oh, I just thought of that. You see, now that is exactly the reframing that I'm about to talk about. Because I could see that as I was tired, I took myself for a coffee, I was trying to relax, and I was interrupted by a phone call from a doctor. Yes, it was very late. It was like 7:15, something like that. A phone call from a doctor to talk about a patient. Now, I could see that. It's very interesting because it's just happened. I could see that as an imposition. I could see that as taking my time that I didn't expect to give, and it dragged on quite a lot. Now I'm just realizing that that was a consultation with a specialist about a patient, what we call in a consilium. So already we're starting to get onto the subject. I hadn't realized that that's exactly what happened tonight. So let's talk about reframing. Reframing, as you imagine, could you imagine you have a picture? And in that picture, you have a very cheap frame. Now, you have a picture with a very cheap frame. One would expect that to be a cheap picture, a picture with not much importance, not much value. If you change the frame for a very modern frame or a classical frame, gilded and nice things, already you start to think that the picture is of more value. And the concept of reframing is you take something that is. You're not about to change any facts. It doesn't work that way. You take the facts that are there and you look at them differently. Now, there's also context, there's also background, there's also scale. And all these things are ways to take facts and put them in such a way that they have a different value. Now, one of the things that irritates me enormously, that you see very, very often on the internet and a bit on the news and sometimes in the newspapers, is that when you see a graph of something that has happened recently. So let's take, for instance, the shares in American companies. So the shares in American companies have gone down enormously over the last weeks due to these tariffs. I position myself whether good or bad, it is a fact that the value of the shares has gone down. So the shares have gone down, let's just say 10%. Now, unfortunately, with the way that these are presented, the scale that is used is to look at basically the beginning moment and the end moment. And you see the difference. It goes down from there to there. It's a big drop. However, that bit there is the 90% of what it was before. That is the 100%. Now, if you actually look at a graph that actually takes into account the whole 100%, there we go. That's your 90%. That's your 100%. The difference, it is 10%. It could be a lot of money, but visually, it's not that important. And it happens the same way. You have something that goes up from there to there. Difficult. That's a funny hand waving there. From there to there, and it looks huge. But if it's gone up 10%, it's actually gone up that much. So that's part of the framing of it. That's how we look at stuff. And very often with statistics, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. Benjamin Disraeli. And statistics are awful because people can manipulate these figures to show basically what they want. They ask certain questions in a certain way. They bring the figures that they're looking for. Then they present their figures in such a way that it advances the story that they wish to give. So this is also part of reframing. You're taking facts and you're presenting them in a certain way that gives a certain value, that creates a certain story. So I'll give you a personal, for instance, how this framing, how they can change things, is that when I was doing my first studies, many moons ago, we're talking about nearly 50 years, really old, you know, and I went to university. I was considered to be pretty intelligent and smart and a bit of the genius of the family, whatever. So I went there and I was expecting to do great things. And I was disappointed. I was disappointed with myself. So why was I disappointed with myself? Disappointed myself because I had an average of what they call a 2-2. And a 2-2 is really a bit below the average, to be honest, a little bit below the average. And I thought, I'm supposed to be smart, supposed to be intelligent, I'm supposed to be clever, and I'm below average. That's awful to see yourself like that. And then I found out, now I don't remember how I found out, this was before Google, before ChatGPT, and this was not before cars. There were computers as well, but it wasn't these sort of things. So I have no idea how I managed to get this information, but I actually found out that there was only 5% of the British population that succeeded to get to university. With what they call numerous clausus, with a limited number of places, it was linked to about 5%. And so then I looked at that, and then I thought, hey, I'm in the middle of that 5%. So I'm in the top 2.5%. So, exactly the same thing I was talking about with the graphs. If I looked at the graph at university, that was top university, bottom university, I was in the middle, which is not brilliant. If I looked at the whole British population and their academic record, there's the 100%. That was here in the top 2.5%. That was much more valorizing for myself. So that was the first time that, without knowing the concept of reframing, that I got to the point where I actually used that to be able to see things differently. And this seeing things differently is so important within my work. And within my work, I often get situations where people feel very negative about themselves, negative about the situations. And if they take a step back and they look at it differently, then all of a sudden the reality becomes different. It's a bit like these optical illusions. You look at it from one way, it's one thing, but if another way, it's something else. The truth of the matter is it's always both. It's just which particular aspect you choose to see, that you choose to become real. Everything is real. And as I say, the most important thing in my work as a therapist is trust. So if my patient doesn't trust me, then they're not going to tell me secrets. And if I tell them things, and then I'm going to listen to what I'm going to say because they don't believe that what I say is true. And this is why the trust in many situations, but absolutely in therapy is the most important thing. More than anything else, if you trust your therapist, and then things are going to go relatively well. If your therapist is a total idiot, then it's not going to help that much. But that's the first, the most important thing. And for me, just to give you a bit the way that I function, is that yes, I will take a positive aspect of something and I will reinforce it and I'll say, go this way, go that way. But I never say anything that's not fundamentally true. I will not tell someone that's not pretty that they're pretty. I'll not tell someone that's not intelligent they're intelligent. I won't do that because somewhere deep down they'll know I'm not telling the truth. And that just breaks the confidence. So that's not going to work. But when I tell them things and I help them to see things from a different point of view, holding on to the reality, not changing any facts, just the interpretation of those facts, then things can change. So, First situation is a middle-aged man living in Montreux. Montreux is like, it's not the seaside, but it's a very nice part of around the Lake Geneva. That's where they have the jazz festival and other things. And I worked there for 10 years in Montreux. So I had a patient comes to me. He's unemployed. He's depressed because he's unemployed. He's 40 something or 50. Difficult to find another job. He's had one job for many, many years. And he's depressed. He's depressed because he can't find a job. And I say, okay, let's just look at your life. It says you've been working for 20 years or so at this job. Yeah. So how many weeks holiday do you have a year? He says, well, 5 weeks. In Switzerland, it's 5 weeks if you've been there for a while. And a few days left and right for bank holidays. So I say, okay, so how does it work? I say, you take a week off for Easter, take 2 weeks off in the summer, you take a week off, there's autumn holidays, and you take a week plus a few holiday days over Christmas, New Year. So that's it, isn't it? So of course, what do you expect? I say, well, just look at it now. People save up for months and months and months to be able to come to Montreux. You, with your unemployment, which is about 80% for 1 or 2 years in Switzerland of what you've been working, you got your last 3 paychecks. So you had a pretty good job, you had quite a lot of money, a good wage, and 80% is really satisfactory for being able to live, pay his rent, food, health, and have quite a lot of money on the side. He was single. I say, well, people save up for months and months and months to come here in Montreux for the summer, for maybe 2 weeks holiday. You're here all the time. He says, yes, but I'm unemployed. I say, but what does it change? Yes, you're supposed to do some research to try and get a job, which is maybe an hour, maximum 2 hours a day. Maximum. So for the rest of the time, you do what you want, don't you? He says, yes. So you can walk near the lake, you can stop and have a coffee, you can read a newspaper, you can look at your phone, do this. He said, of course I can. I said, well, it's like being on holiday, isn't it? It's like a long holiday. He said, well, I never thought of it that way. Of course he never thought of it that way. Because that's what I do and what most people don't. They don't look at things from another point of view. That's they're unemployed, they need to find a job, they're a failure, and it's horrible. But no, why can't somebody have a good time? Why can't you go to the swimming pool every day? It's just a question of how you look at it. I had a patient that was an asylum seeker. And asylum seekers are not allowed to work. They get the minimum. They stay in a shared house. They have a shared room. They have a certain amount of money or means to buy food, which they can cook themselves. And most people, they just hung around outside of the hostel, smoking and feeling bored and wasting their time. This patient with exactly the same situation, the same status, the same money, everything the same. He saw this as a vacation. He decided to. Same sort of thing as the person unemployed, asylum seeker, same sort of thing. He would go down to the lake, a place called Ushi, which is the bottom of Lausanne, in the lake. Those are the spots where there's sand. And he would plant himself near the barbecue. There's open barbecues for people. Plant himself near the barbecue. He had a music player. He would buy some cheap beers. He would buy some sausages or some cheap food, some charcoal. And he would spend his day there on the beach like anybody would on holiday. And he'd chat up, he was quite good looking. He would chat up the girls, he'd go for a swim, he'd sunbathe, he'd listen to music, he'd drink a few beers. That was the way that he chose to live the summer in Lausanne, because he saw it as a holiday, not as some sort of purgatory, which most asylum seekers see this experience, because they're not allowed to work and they just have to hang around hoping that they will get a permit. So that's another situation like that. I'll give you another one. I'm giving these situations so you can see how one can take something which seems to be very negative, and when you start to look at it from another point of view, it can become actually quite positive. So I had an American woman, came to Switzerland, worked for a couple of years, one big company. She got pressured at work, she had a burnout, and then she fell into a deep depression. She was here long enough to get permits so she could stay. And then in this depression, she came across a very, very nice Portuguese guy who also had a permit and was working here. And he sort of took her under his wings. He helped her. She was quite an attractive woman, but very, very, very depressed. So for a number of years, they lived together. Eventually, he bought a house. They were married. And they had this sort of relationship where he would basically look after her. And she was appreciative of all the care, because he was an incredibly caring person. Nice guy. Big guy. Engineer. And so she came to me while I was in Montreux. I'm in Lausanne now. This is Lausanne. And we worked. And after a number of years, sometimes a deep depression can take a number of years to sort itself out. And eventually she came slowly out of her depression. And then one nice day, she says, "Oh, I'm feeling much better, Mr. Gedol. I think maybe I could do things now." And I said, "Well, okay, well, what's your first dream? What do you want to do?" I thought she was going to get a job. And so she surprised me a little bit. She said, "I'm going to get divorced." I thought, that's not really expected. And I said, "What do you mean get the divorce?" She says, "I realize now that I feel so much better that I'm with my husband because I needed him. I've never loved him. I appreciate him. He's a really nice guy, but I've never loved him. And I think it's not fair on him to stay in a relationship with someone who doesn't love him. He deserves to find someone better, and I'm going to divorce him." So she goes home. Next day, I get this irate phone call. "Mr. Geller, what have you done? You've turned my wife against me. She wants to divorce me. It's all your fault." I say, just give me a moment. Let me talk to her. So I put her on the phone. I said, "Listen, I can see that your husband is most upset. Would you be okay if I see him?" She says, "Of course. Why not?" So, "Can I tell him what has happened in the last session?" She says, "Yeah, sure. Do what you want." He's crazy. He's like a mad bull. So I made an emergency meeting with him the next evening, and he came, and he was upset, and he was angry, and he was like banging the door. These people when they're a bit upset. And he said, Mr. Gedda, you've ruined my life. You wrecked my life. I don't know what to do with my life anymore. And she was the center of my life, and everything revolved around her. And I said, look, would you be okay to become a patient of mine? Not that I'm looking for patients, but this seemed to me to be my responsibility. And he said, yes. I said, I need to check with your wife. She's okay with it. If she's okay, I will take you on as a patient. Now, most psychologists, psychotherapists would never do that. To take two people that are married, that are about to get separated and divorced, they would never do that because of the medical secret, because of the shared responsibility, loyalties, and things like that. But because I'm a lunatic and because I know what I'm doing, I accepted that. I phoned her up. I said, are you okay if I take him as a patient? Medical secret very important to me. I won't tell him anything about what we have done or what we have said. Only this last session, because you've said it's okay. After that, you know, what they call it in law, a Chinese wall. I'm on both sides. So he came and we started to talk. And he poured his heart out and how he was so invested and he loved it so much. And then all of a sudden I had this thought. I said, what did you like to do before you were in a relationship with her? He says, what's that to the point? I said, just humor me. What did you like to do? He says, well, one of the things that I used to like to do is to go on my motorbike. You know, I used to drive a lot on my motorbike. I said, well, what's stopping you driving now? He says, well, I sold my motorbike because she was scared I'd have an accident and then she would give me a hard time every time I go out. And she was worried and she was anxious and she was, depressed anyway. So the idea that he'd go out at all was already not good. And the fact that he'd go on his motorbike that he could do himself harm, so he wouldn't be available for her, was like worse. So I said, okay, now you're separated. Why don't you go and buy yourself a motorbike? He says, can I do that, Mr. Gadol? It's like, that'll me. I said, well, why not? You're now separated. She's going to live her own life. You're going to live your own life. Live your life. Do whatever it is that pleases you, as long as it doesn't disturb her directly, and see what happens. So she won't like it. I said that she doesn't have the right not to like it. Once you are now being separated, she loses all rights to you at all. You're sharing a house at the moment till she gets an apartment. You're good neighbors, you're nice with each other. But what you do with your time is your business. And she's going to have to cope with that because she wants to be separated, divorced. You can't have the bun and the halfpenny, as they say in English. Say all the things in French. Can't have that. So he goes away, beginning of the summer. Don't hear from him for weeks. Phones me up. Mr. Gedol, can I have an appointment, please? No worries. Next week, I find him a place. Comes in, and he's brown as a berry. It's like tanned all over. It's like this. I say, well, what's happened? Have you been on the beach for the last 4 weeks? He says, no. I've been all over the south of France with my mates that I've not spent any time with for 4 years. And we spent weeks together on the road. We'd go down, we'd go somewhere, we'd get some beers, we'd have a nice evening. Either we'd stay in a B&B or we'd sleep under the stars. It was wonderful. Mr. Gedel, thank you. It's like I'd let him out of prison. There was a bit that energy. Because what had happened? The reality was the same. He was invested in his relationship. He was happy to sacrifice certain individual pleasures that he had for his girlfriend and then wife. And she wanted to separate. Those were the facts. Now, whether you take that as I'm going to lose everything I'm invested in, which is his first reaction, or whether I have been limiting myself for her for years and not doing the things that I had pleasure doing before, it's two sides of the same coin. It's not different. It's just a different way of seeing reality. And that's what I do quite a lot in my therapies. I help people to look differently at the same thing. Not that there was anything that has changed in the facts. The facts are the facts. You are working, you're not working, you're an asylum seeker, you're not an asylum seeker, you're married and you're in an invested relationship or not. And you are separated and you are independent to live your life and do the things that feel good. And it's always a bit the same thing. It's always a bit that, for instance, I'll give you another for instance. Um, Once I was, what time is it? I can't see very clearly. Okay, I've got 10 minutes. No, don't have 10 minutes. Oh, 4 minutes. Okay, so we'll leave that. Another story for another time of when I was working for Saga Records in London and I got sacked. How I dealt with that, because I also dealt with that. And I'll tell you. I was working for Saga Records for a man called Mr. Marcel Rod, who was a bit of a strange fish. And I worked there for a number of months. And I made the mistake of telling the truth to a client that his records were not being pressed when Mr. Rod had said yes, they were being pressed. So the client phoned up Mr. Rod and was very upset that he'd been lied to. And then Mr. Rod sacked me for that. And I took that actually quite well. And that evening, because I was living under the pressure of the threat of being sacked like constantly, because he was a difficult boss, a very difficult boss. And it was a relief. I had no idea what I would do in the future. I was living in London. I was supposed to be doing a work experience for university. And somehow I just felt the relief. And then it was Friday night. And I had like 3 or 4 paychecks because and my paycheck for the week, it was weekly page. Weekly page, there was a week's notice. There was holiday pay. So altogether, I had like 3 wage packets. So like I was not doing too badly for that weekend anyway. And usually would go to the bar. And I just said, okay, I'm freed from this pressure of this job. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I felt free. I felt liberated. Now, I didn't think about restructuring, reframing, or anything like that. It was just that a lot of the other workers were concerned how sad I'd be because what they saw was I'd lost my job. And what they saw, I was liberated from something that was uncomfortable. Again, it's the same thing. Look at things from another point of view. Turn a lemon into a lemonade. See, if you've got something that's uncomfortable, that's difficult, how could you interpret it differently? The same facts. We're not saying live in a fantasy. We're not saying deny reality. We're saying how can we take what's real and look at it in a more positive, more useful, more creative way. So that's what we're talking about this evening. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for your attention. It's Tuesday night, so I'm here Wednesday night and Thursday night at 8:30 Central European summertime. Saturday is going to be very interesting. It's at 4:30 in the afternoon, and it's how to deal with aggressive people. It's, I think, a very important subject. By chance, I have a lot of experience of dealing with aggressive people, and there are very different techniques that you can use in different situations. So it's really worth to think about what can happen and to at least have an idea of the different things that you can do that might work. I don't guarantee if you do what I've done, it will work because I'm not everybody. I have different sensitivities and different ways of doing things, but it would certainly be worth you taking a look at. I think it's very important as a video and a live video at that. Sunday it's going to be another hypnosis meditation. So I don't know what it's going to be about. We'll find out in a moment. And so if you find this interesting, please like, please subscribe, share with your friends. The 70-day challenge is free. So if they want to be invested in the 70-day challenge, they can still do that. There's only about 4.5 weeks left, but you can still do something. Maybe you'll get some sort of partial success, but it's worth going for. So that's about it for now. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you maybe tomorrow, but certainly I hope on Saturday. Bye for now.